How tough is combat in Remnant? Is it just a regular shooter game with occasional difficult to handle situation? No. Is it just a game where a magical power casted at the last minute can save you from certain death? No. Is it an unforgiving game that will test your skills to the breaking point, forcing you to approach it in different ways until you succeed because you learn from your mistakes? Yes. Is it Dark Souls? No. It's not. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome in Remnant from the Ashes. Remnant from the Ashes is an unforgiving third-person looter shooter game with a huge focus on its tough Soulslike combat system that will crush you. You will die in Remnant. A lot. A lot. If you don't know what you're doing. Managing your HP and stamina, mastering the art of dodging at the last second and being able to decide in a blink of an eye to press charge forward and finish off your enemy, or tactically retreating to an advantage point in order to get the upper hand in combat. Everything can change in a moment if you are careless in this game. Take a look on how this party gets wrecked in mere seconds because they underestimated the situation.
I don't see anything to hurt. Oh wait, these guys look mean.
There's friendly fire here too, in case you're thinking about trying that.
You're doomed. What is he throwing at me? Okay, what just happened?
Exactly. We are here because we want to prevent what happened to them to happen to you. So strap in, because we're about to take a deeper look into everything we know so far on Remnant's combat system. Beware that there's still time before release, so anything I say in this video can still be different in the final version of the game. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome in Remnant's... Wait a sec. I said this already, didn't I? Starting off with a basic question, what you, in terms of your character, are able to do. Basic actions like running and sprinting are quite ordinary, yet very important in any game. How you move dictates where you can go and how you can go. Wanna sprint to get cover behind a fallen pillar to avoid enemies' shots? What if you could instead slide towards it? And what if your slide has also invincibility frames? Knowing that, it is clear what's your best option. And that is what makes the difference in any game. Knowing what you and your enemies can and can't do. What are your possibilities, your best course of action in order to succeed. Aside from basic actions like running and sprinting, in Remnant, your character can also vault on things like small objects, guardrails, balconies, window frames and things like that. Basically anything that is high enough to be vaulted on. Oh, they can vault so smoothly with that huge backpack, however, I can't really tell, but they do it! The vault, as far as we know, has no iframes, it's just what it is. Just a vault, to avoid obstacles. Since your character doesn't look to be able to jump, unfortunately, vaulting will come many times in handy, to avoid going back or walk your way around things. Sliding to cover, like mentioned before, is another action you can perform. You can do that by pressing the crunch button while sprinting. And yes, I'm mentioning a crunch button without saying that you can crunch, but it's a shooter game, what were you expecting? The slide appears to be slightly faster than sprinting, and also lowers your body and your hitbox, reducing the chance of getting hit from enemies. And it has also iframes. We don't know yet how many, but we know for sure that it has less iframes than a regular roll. Speaking of which, the dodge roll is your primary active way to avoid incoming damage, since there's no shield in the game. Looks like it can be performed at any time, provided your character is not staggered from enemies' attacks. This means that you can dodge while you're aiming, running, sprinting or attacking an enemy with your melee weapon. Attack cancelling is a thing. We know for sure that rolling provides us with the highest amount of iframes in the game, in normal conditions. And I say in normal conditions because there are factors that can affect the way you roll. For example, if you get overcumbered, your roll animation will change into a sort of falling on the ground animation. The devs say it will have more iframes than the regular roll, you being invulnerable in fact until you fully land on the ground. However, the recovery time for that will be exponentially longer, so you can potentially avoid more, but you will be much more vulnerable at the end of the animation. Depending from your equipment weight, not only your roll will change, but it can also cover a different amount of ground. There is also a fast roll that you will perform if you have particularly light gear, just like that. For what we've seen so far, rolling and sprinting are the only two actions that will consume your stamina. Attacking by using your melee weapon in fact won't consume any stamina, but it will halt your stamina regeneration while you are performing the attack animation. Stamina recover over time at a pretty solid rate. I do believe this to be influenced by your gear, where the lighter you are, the faster your stamina will regenerate, although I was not able to find any actual proof of that, so this is just my guess for now. For what I've seen, stamina seems also to recover while you're shooting with your gun, which can only happen if you aim. In Remnant, there is in fact no shooting from the hip. This is due to the fact that if you press the attack button while not aiming, your character will instantly switch to melee combat. This is very useful to switch quickly between the two in the middle of the fight, but it can also make extremely difficult to aim at point blank range, since aiming over the shoulder doesn't work well at very close distance in general, forcing you to either retreat by rolling away, which is a good option but it's not always possible, or engage in a melee fight with your enemy. And that most of the times can be a bad choice. In fact, as a general rule in this game, you really want to try to stay away from your enemies as much as you can, because the game seems to reward much more the gunplay in general, making shooting the safest way to deal with enemies. Unless you are a melee character, you don't want to trade it with your enemies. They hit hard, and your healing items are limited, and the Dragon Heart, which is your primary source of heal, will have only a set amount of charges at the beginning of the game. So you want to keep your distance when you can. However, side note here, a melee build seems to be very possible. I've seen many types of equipments focused on melee characters, and I do believe that with the correct combination of weapon modes, traits and equipment, a melee build will be valid as any other in the game. It will just take more time to make. Also, it's worth to mention that every melee weapon has their own category moveset. For instance, swords can generally share the same moveset with 3-hit combo, but they will have different attack speeds and stats. Also, you can go for quick attacks by tapping the attack button, or hold it to perform a stronger charge attack. And the two variants are interchangeable mid-combo. Each melee weapon has also a special sprinting attack, and if you press the dodge button without inputting any direction, your character will perform a small back dodge, which then can be followed up with another melee attack, usually the last one of the weapon combo. And you know, it is nice to see that there is depth even in this aspect of Remnant, which is primarily a shooter game, so hats off for that really. I have to go out of track now for a moment and say, think about it. It could have been so much easier for the devs to just land when many other games are and give us like a shoulder bash or a weapon bash and completely forget about melee players. But no, they've implemented a full melee combat system that brings on the table a lot more variety in gameplay, and that makes you see the dedication they put behind this game. With that being said, the real focus of the game are guns. Remnant is designed to be a range-centric game, but you can always run out of ammo, especially if you miss a lot. In that case, you can fall back on melee, but as said, you want to focus on keeping the enemies away from you as much as you can. You'll be able to carry two firearms at the same time, one long gun and one handgun. It is also worth mentioning that while you're aiming, you can switch the shoulder you're aiming with in order to have better visual if needed, for example around corners or pillars. There are 40 different types of guns, each one of them with their own stats and gameplay mechanics. Remnant's weapon pool is certainly not huge, but every single weapon serves its purpose. For what we've seen so far, for what the devs told us, you can potentially beat the game with your starting weapons if you keep upgrading them. You won't necessarily need to find better ones. That means that every weapon counts and can make the difference in combat. For example, a sniper rifle that deals a lot more damage at long range, it might not be that useful at close range. With the long time it takes between shots, you'll definitely want to switch to something more quick. A pistol, for example, that yes, it deals less damage but shoots faster, it can stagger enemies and it's quicker to reload. So it really depends again on knowing what your equipment is capable of in order to make the right decision at the right time.
Yeah, see, I really like fighting these guys with the pistol because it fires so fast and you can build up the stagger on these guys real quick.
Guns brings that concept one step further with weapon mods. As mentioned in a previous video though, they are not what you can expect from the term weapon mode. They are more like abilities or spells. They can be slotted into your guns and swapped in and out at any time, and they add a new layer of depth to the combat. There are many of them. Some of them can regenerate your HP, some others can make your character stronger against enemy hits for a period of time. Summon minions to help your fightings, or absorb damage, reflect damage, place a beacon to attract enemies, and many others. The mod you have currently equipped will be showed in the bottom right corner of the screen directly next to the weapon it's slotted into. Before being able to use that mod, however, you'll have to charge it, and for doing that, you'll have to hit enemies with that specific weapon. Once fully charged, they can be activated when more convenient for you, and that's very important because I think that learning how and when using them will be the key to succeed in difficult situations. Of course, the way you build your character and then approach to combat will be entirely up to you. At the beginning of the game you can choose one between 3 different classes, each one of them fit to a different role. For example, sniper or support, but they are just starting points. Choosing one of them won't set your character on a specific path, and you will still be able to use any equipment that you can find in your playthrough, personalizing them as you prefer in order to face different situations or specific types of enemies. Speaking of which, in Remnant you will find a ton of different enemies. 140 archetypes to be precise, but they can all be divided in 3 big groups: common enemies, elite enemies, and bosses. Common enemies are the ones that will come at you in waves, and they are there essentially to make you feel good by killing them. They're not a real threat if you deal with them quick enough, but they can become a big problem if they surround you, so don't let them do. Elite enemies are special type of enemies that provide a much bigger challenge. There are many different types, each one of them will have a distinctive trait. Some of them can be bulky and very resistant to damage, some others may teleport and use ranged combat, it depends. Regardless, you will need to know how to identify them and, more importantly, how to kill them. You will realize that one of them has spawned next to you from a very distinctive chime sound that you will be able to hear when, well, one of them spawns next to you.
Alright, you may have heard that chime sound. That was to indicate that there is going to be an elite monster that spawned.
Bosses can be divided into big subgroups. Regular bosses that you will find at the end of the dungeon, usually upgraded version of elite enemies that you can find in that area, or world bosses. And now the first one can put up a good fight, testing your skill and rewarding you with nice trinkets when defeated, but the seconds are the real deal. And you'll need to use everything you learn up to that point in the game in order to beat them. Once you'll manage to do so, they will drop something really special, usually a weapon material, which you can then use to craft a boss weapon. And depending on the way you kill them, you can obtain different version of their unique weapon. But that's a topic for another video. I just wanted to touch briefly on it because it's worth mentioning. Despite the many different types and characteristics, every enemy will always have a weak spot, soft spots and hard spots. You can tell the difference immediately when you're shooting at them by looking at your damage numbers. If you are hitting an enemy and your damage numbers are plain white, then you are dealing regular damage and hitting a soft spot. On the other hand, if the damage numbers are small and grey, then you're hitting an hard spot and you maybe don't want to shoot there, like an armor or a tougher part of the skin. If your damage number is yellow, congratulations, you just scored a crit. However, if you see red, now that's a weak spot. Oh, and if you see a brighter red, don't go crazy, you just scored a crit on top of a weak spot. Hey, well done. Combat in Remnant looks to be very challenging but also very rewarding. We will die, yes, we will die a lot, but I can't wait for it. It looks to be so dynamic and well crafted. Many factors can influence combat. Your playstyles, the weapon you're using, your playstyle, your equipment, your playstyle, what kind of enemies you encounter, your breakfast. Did you eat enough? Are you slept this night enough? Are you well rested? These things are important, guys.